Ritchie. Maybe on Walker. Pugh. That'll do it! That will do it! Pugh for Bournemouth! The roof of the goal stands is raised! Everyone here knows what that could mean to this football club.
Well, hello there and welcome to this very special show on Back of the Net. We are at episode 100. This podcast is being recorded live and streamed on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook, but you might be listening in the conventional way on a Monday morning on your way to work or whilst you're having your morning walk. But either way, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Sam Davis and we want to welcome you to the show. Now, on this programme, we're going to be mulling over our match on Saturday at Dean Court against Queen's Park Rangers with the help of not one, not two, but three podcast heroes. We'll introduce them to you shortly. Plus, we'll also be looking forward to our Whisper It Quietly Sky televised match. Yeah, the club haven't said about that. We'll talk about that later. And that's against Cardiff City on Wednesday night. So whilst you might want to be listening to the dulcet tones of Chris and Willow on AFCB TV, you equally might prefer to tune in on the box rather than be hunched over a laptop. Either way, it should be a real test for us. Now, before we bring in our guests, should we do this? Now, one of our guests tonight created that jingle and I keep singing it all the time. It's always in my head and probably in yours. Now, being episode 100, we've reached a milestone here at the podcast. So we thought we'd ask a few questions, all of which represent milestones, and we'll give you the answers at the end of the show. So the questions are this, and I'll probably put these to our guests as well at some point. Which player has scored the highest number of goals in a single season for the Cherries? Which player has scored the highest number of goals in a season for the Cherries? Which player, this is an easy one, has garnered the most league appearances? Do you know that one? You probably do. And also, well done if you get this. What is the record attendance at Dean Court? You can have it to the nearest 1,000. And who was it against? So do you know the answer to that? We'll let you know at the end of the show.
Hi, this is the big un, Steve Fletcher, and you're listening to Back of the Net.
So I'm sure some of our guests will know the answers to those. I think it's time to bring them in one by one. Firstly, the founder of Back of the Net, live from New Zealand, the one and only Sean Barker. How are you, Sean? You might just need to unmute your mic for us because it seems to be muted. Alas, we can hear you now.
Hello, Sam. Kia ora. How are you?
How are you doing? Are you all right?
I'm all right, although it's Monday morning here, so the last hour has been the frantic trying to get the kids out the house to school and preschool, so I can just relax and, see your face for a little while.
Well, Sean, I can tell you that this certainly wasn't the 100th episode that we planned. As Jeff and I, we were planning to fly you across from Wellington, but coronavirus, it's got in the way, it's had its impact. It's having its impact over here, but from the media reports in New Zealand, you seem to have dealt with it pretty well, and it's almost like back to normal, is it?
Yeah, pretty much. So we had a little bump about 3 weeks ago where we had to kind of up our restrictions a little bit, but I can't fault what we've done here. What the Prime Minister and the team have done have been phenomenal, really, and I think sometimes we take it for granted. There's some people here who even have complained about what we're doing at the moment, the inconvenience of having to have, 2 weeks where we couldn't order a drink at the bar. They had to come to us and they were like, wow, this is outrageous. And then it's like, we looked out the window. So we are very fortunate. We are very grateful. We're sorry for what's going on around almost the rest of the world, but take light from, I guess, the fact it can be done. And, it's easy to get in the dark times and think things will never get back to normal. We have stadiums full of fans again. So no doubt it won't be long until Dean Court is rocking again.
I certainly hope so. Right then, next, it's only fair that I bring in someone who helped with the rebirth of Back of the Net after the sabbatical that we had the season before last. It is Jeff Hayward. How are you, Jeff?
I'm pretty good, Sam. Thanks for being such a part of this special show. It's a great honour, and to be here with obviously Sean, who Sean got me hooked on it in the first place. So you two on a Monday morning was my ritual, driving to work, listening to you. So thanks, and it's an honour. I am not worthy.
Oh, I'm sure we'll talk later about memories, but and we'll do the kissy stuff at the moment. But you two, it's been a pleasure to be able to listen, and be role reversal almost, Jeff, to hear what you guys have done and keep up to date with. My life got incredibly hectic with the kids and work, and I'm so glad to see it kind of Back in the Net resurrected. And it's been amazing. Although too much telly time for Sam, Jeff. You need to up your percentage, I think.
Yeah, well, you know how vain he is, don't you, Sean? Jeez.
Yeah, big time. Well,
you so do.
So as featured in many a podcast previously, we got one of the pundits here as well that's revered by many a YouTube viewer and a podcast listener. He is a favourite on the forums, or maybe not so much at the moment. We might talk to him about that, but it is Neil Dawson here. Neil, how are you, sir?
I'm very good, Sam. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Neil. Not too bad.
So, Jeff, you've seen Neil's match reports on the forum, and he's always active, but he's not on it anymore. It's a shame, isn't it?
I know. I think it's like one of those Hammer horror films. He got chased out, didn't he, by people weaving pitchforks and torches at him. How are you dealing with it, Neil? Were you missing it?
No, not at all. No, I mean, I've done it for years and years and years. It was really lovely on Saturday, actually, because match reports recently have been a bit miserable. So I've been toying with the idea for a little while of handing the baton on, and I didn't miss not having to write about Saturday's 2 shots off target, and I went for a run instead. So I feel a lot healthier for it.
Good. So at this stage, I feel as though I also need to give a massive, huge mention to Michael Dunn and All Departments, a podcast which served Bournemouth fans so well over the years, many of which are still listenable on YouTube. Michael also contributed considerably to Back of the Net with his concise and well-written match reports. And later in the show, we'll talk about the history of the podcast, and I'm sure we'll be alluding to his input a lot more.
Hi, I'm Scott Mitchell. I was the 2015 BDO World Champion, and you're listening to the podcast Back of the Net.
Right, so I feel as though we need to get stuck into Queen's Park Rangers on Saturday. It was a pretty poor and leggy 0-0, not one for the neutral, and one at times we looked possibly likely more to lose than win, but with the top 2 also dropping points, we didn't lose any ground, and Cherries still sit third in the table. Let's be frank, Jeff Hayward, it wasn't great, was it?
Well, you just said, let's get stuck into QPR. I mean, geez, I wish we'd got stuck into QPR. It was awful, absolutely awful. And I struggled to see where that performance came from. We were also upbeat after the Coventry game, looking forward to the match. I mean, I had it down as a 4-0 home win, which I thought was being conservative after the way we played. And then you get that and you think, it's just like watching some of the worst stuff last season.
It wasn't particularly great. What was your view from over there in New Zealand, Sean?
Interesting you say that, Jeff. It did have echoes of the last season or last 18 months, really. It was an odd one because it's obviously we've all heard lots of talk about they were leggy and it's after an international break, but I don't remember that being the standard after every single international break. It just felt odd. It felt a bit disjointed. It felt like we just obviously without your Danjumas or without Stanislas or without Brooks, creativity in that final area just there just wasn't any, was there really? You had Surridge and Solanke, similar-ish kind of players, and it just, I guess the only saving grace, and I think this is the thing that holds us well for the rest of the season, if we can play as poorly as that and still kind of hold our, if it was a boxing analogy, we kind of, we're holding the boxer away and they're swinging, but they're not really hitting us. And then, if we'd have found another 10%, I think we probably still would have won the game. That was the only positive I could really take from it.
So we were all very buoyed, I think, by the news that Josh King was staying, or were we? Because we don't really know how it's going to play out in terms of his performances. But Neil Dawson, were you surprised that we still had Josh King?
Yes. I think to me, he was even more likely to leave than Callum Wilson. If you'd asked me back in whenever the season finished, it's hard to remember these days, September or July, whenever it was. I always thought we'd lose Nathan Ake. I think we all did. And then you could sort of form a list after that, and Josh King would have been higher up than some of the ones that went. So I really hope that what we need to see from him now is I don't think he wants to be here, but he'll make all the right noises and kiss the badge and do all that sort of stuff. But he's got to get himself 8 or 10 goals between now and January, because that will make him box seat for the inevitable Premier League clubs that are struggling to score, that are going to want to bring in a centre forward that's got a track history of scoring in the Premier League. So hopefully it will work out both for him and us. There's no point in him sulking, because it won't do him any good. It's not like a Ryan Fraser situation where the season had technically finished. Josh King has to do something in the next 4 months to get himself on everyone's mind.
Sean, I presume that, I don't quite know how it works, but the better he performs for us, the more goals he scores, the more money we'll get in January. Would that be accurate?
Yes, and there's also in January, as we know, because Eddie never liked the January transfer windows, because he felt like transfer rates are inflated because you have these sides, like Neil said, who are desperate for a striker. So it feels like we've taken the gamble of, there will be less players available, ergo we will get more money. The flip side of that is, we're gambling on how Joshua responds to this. He saw what happened with Wee Man and Wee Man's performances. Having said all that, Wee Man is still in the Premier League right now and Joshua isn't. So it's going to be a very, very interesting few months. I think the way JT handles it without disrupting the team, because I think the Fraser episode, it felt like it was just bad vibes that went through that side last season. And I guess it's a matter of how do we avoid that situation. And either, I think within 3 weeks, we'll know whether he's out and he's in the reserves and he's just training ready for January, or he's going to put his all in and get those goals and get his move.
So, Jeff, the team lineup was exactly the same as what it was against Coventry, but it was great to see some new blood on the bench in terms of Riquelme, but Stanislas being back as well. Danjuma too. What did you think when you saw that starting lineup? It was clear that we were playing a sort of 3-5-2. Were you happy with what you saw?
Yeah, well, I felt that he probably didn't have much choice after the way the team played against Coventry. They did play excellently. So he picked the same lineup. Surridge paired with Solanke was probably the only area where I looked at that and thought, could you not have brought Danjuma back? Because the Danjuma-Solanke pairing seemed to have worked well the previous games. And did Surridge really deserve to keep his place, or should he have brought Danjuma on and played him from the start? Josh King was missing. The guys talked about him hopefully not being another Fraser situation, although I'm slightly alarmed that it was a dead leg that kept him out. I'm hoping that next time he's not available, it's not a sore throat that kills him. Because I think
be a fractured eyelash next time.
Well, you talk a lot about, what a great asset he could be, but actually it feels like Jason and Purchaser, they've kind of moved on with the squad. I think they kind of forgot about Josh and we're playing this lineup. And who does he actually replace? Would he replace Solanke, or would he replace Surridge, or would he replace Danjuma? It's going to be tough for him to actually fit in, I think, if he is going to be available and playing 100% as he can do.
Yeah, well, the early exchanges in the game showed that it wasn't all us. I think Osai Samuel got a shot off low that Begovic saved. Once again, maybe proving Tyndall right for choosing him over Travers. But I felt that we were sloppy and turgid in the early stages. QPR were playing very high press and we were making a lot of mistakes. QPR was set up very well, Neil, weren't they? And they, to be fair, they gave it a good go.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Warburton's an experienced coach at this level. He will have watched us. This is where we need to be adaptable and not slip back into what we had in the last 2 seasons, really, when we set up a certain way and then that was the way we were always going to play through the game. So if people are playing 3 at the back, it relies on them being able to get the fullbacks out and play them as wingers. If you can push those fullbacks back, then they've got 5 at the back and they can't threaten. And that's exactly what happened. And the counter to that is you've just got to be brave. And even though it is counterintuitive, you've got to leave fullbacks up the pitch while the team are being attacked. And some teams have done that really well. And it's always been my criticism of whenever we play 3 at the back, if ever we come up against anyone good, it always ends up at 5 at the back. And we always end up not getting out. And it happened to us a number of times last year. And we've ended up with it happening to us again. But that's all Mark Warburton did. He just put the high press on and that was it. We ended up with 2 midfielders defending, a back 5, and then 3 floating around up front. We couldn't get the ball to them.
So, I guess, Neil, that's the interesting part. Just thinking about that around the wing-backs is that you've always got that dilemma with wing-backs of do you play defenders as wing-backs or do you play a more attacking-minded player? Yeah. And I think with Stacey and Smith, they are still defenders. So their natural inclination is going to be, I'm going to drop back into my default position. Yeah. Whereas sometimes when you are a little bit braver and and we've seen it work in the past sometimes where we've had a winger, we've had a wingman playing there. And I was going to say, I went to the Cup quarter-final away at Stamford Bridge when he was a wing-back, and I think he had probably one of his best games, if not best game I saw him have. And he was a right wing-back, and he did his job defensively, but you knew that his thing was always, can I seize an opportunity further forward? Yeah. And I guess that's the payoff. Against Coventry, we were so high up the field that they didn't really have to think about it, whereas you're absolutely right. I think the tactics of the opposition, it dictated how they set up and they went back into their, okay, I'm a fullback.
And the other key thing I think is if you are going to play with wing backs, that you're only, by nature, you only got one player on the flanks. So they have to be playing on their correct foot. And to have a Smith playing at left wing back, who's your only outlet on the left-hand side, and he cuts into a congested midfield every time because he's right-footed, that in itself is nonsensical.
Can I also add into all of that doesn't matter what the flipping system you play is, you've got to pass the ball to each other.
Totally true. Totally true.
And I mean, there was just a collective kind of, we've forgotten how to play football, which is actually one of our players, you pass the ball to them. And so many times we gave the ball away so easily in that first half.
And you've got to retain possession. And we all sing the song, Lewis Cook, he never gives the ball away. But then he gave the ball away. And then Asmir Begovic, his feet came to the rescue, Jeff. And at that stage, when he was through a goal, to be honest, I was expecting it to hit the back of the net. We were fortunate.
Well, I think there was a point in the second half where the commentator said, Begovic for a throw out should have got man of the match. I mean, that just shows how terrible we were. But that save kept us in the game. And I think, we have this sort of, I don't know where it comes from. It's a sense of complacency. Maybe we think, we'll just strut around and, we'll win the game, whatever happens. And we make mistakes. And we should have been a couple of goals down at half time. I thought QPR with better finishing. If that's the Premier League, we're 2-0 down.
Well, it showed it when they had that low cross from their left-hand side that the striker, he should have done what Solanke did against Middlesbrough, but he just messed it up. But it was poor execution all over, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we just were too passive, we were too deep, we were too slow. It was all the same problems that we had in certain games last season where, I don't know, the sense of fizz and enjoyment that we had at Coventry had completely evaporated. And I think that's That's a sort of bigger, long-term issue with that group of players, that they can't put in back-to-back really good performances.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, can I ask you, Sean, what you think about Dom Solanke? Because he seems to be splitting people here. There are some people that said he did really well. He came deep, he collected the ball. Other people saying he was terrible. He's such an opinion splitter.
He is. I think he's a very talented footballer, and I think we see moments where he has got the skill and he's got the vision and the touch. However, he hasn't got a person next to him who's sticking away 20 goals in a season. I think if he had that person next to him, I think we would be looking at them as a collective. At the moment, it feels like we're looking to him to be the guy. And I just don't think he is that player, because we're just seeing repeatedly he's doing 95% of his game, but he's not going to score you 20, 25 goals a season. But I see enough from him to think he's a very, very good footballer. And I think he does a lot for our team. But at the moment, we're still going, we're at 1 goal in 300 appearances, you know?
I mean, Callum Wilson wasn't overly prolific in the Premier League, albeit, yes, it's a different standard. He did score more than 20 goals in the Championship. But, you know, we did all right in the first few seasons in the Premier League, and we weren't crying out for that 20 goals a season striker. Yet, why are we this time?
I just think it's a matter of, but we're still creating a lot of, well, we're getting the ball in a lot of areas, but we're not creating chances. And when we are, we're not sticking them away, I don't think, as much as we should be. So it's, when you've got players chipping in from all sorts with goals, I think it's a lot easier.
Yeah, I got kind of frustrated at the number of times we got the ball into wide positions, but we seemed terrified to cross it. It's that sort of perfect football that Eddie played a lot last season, where you hold on to the ball, you turn back, you bring the ball back, you have the chance to cross, you bring the ball back, because it's not quite perfect. And I think we need to have more confidence about just getting the ball in the box, because this is the Championship. You don't need to score perfect goals. Defenders will make more mistakes. And I think the incisiveness from the midfield just wasn't there. And maybe that was because Lerma was tired and he wasn't playing as far up as he had been in the previous games. Maybe it was because we just weren't passing the ball well enough. But we just need to take more risks.
The bizarre thing was we were under clear instructions not to cross the ball high. You could see it because Rico and Stacey, every time they got the ball, they played the ball low behind the centre halves every single time. So clearly it was something that had been worked on, because it wasn't just that they were inaccurate or misfiring, which just seemed really odd, because when you got Solanke and Surridge up front, I don't think that would ever be our first choice forward line. Our first choice forward line has to be Danjuma, King and Brooks. That is a Premier League forward line in the Championship. And that's when you would cut the ball back. When you're playing that forward line, you would cut the ball back. But for Solanke and Surridge, who played, maybe because they were the only ones available or whatever, that was a game where you had to get the ball in to their head, because both of them, are 6 foot plus, good in the air strikers. It just seemed really weird that it was almost like we didn't set up to play to the forward line that we had on the pitch.
How quick, say we've got a fit Josh King, Neil, how quickly would you be introducing him? Would you be putting him in straight away?
Instead of Solanke, it's straight away.
And so you're not worried about the lack of confidence he might get through being dropped, and he's basically our player of the future, whereas Josh King's going to be off in a few months. Would that not worry you at all?
No, because we've got one season, maybe two, to capitalise on parachute payments and get back in the Premier League. Yeah. So you play the best side that you've got. If we were mid-table and we were 4 years into the Championship, I'd say there's no point in playing someone that isn't going to be with us long term. But we should have a slightly different agenda if we want to avoid drifting back to where we used to be. So I would get King fit and I'd play him ahead of Solanke, because he's 3 times the player Solanke is.
Now, we were having a little debate off air about this. Neil Dawson, international break. We've got probably more players that are off than any other club in the Championship, and we did look leggy. But do you not feel as though it was because of the international break, or were we just poor?
How many did we have that went that played? Because Lerma and Surridge,
Mepham went as well.
Mepham went. So yeah. So, but when you look at some of the people that looked slightly, because I wouldn't say that Lerma, Mepham, and Surridge were our worst players on the day. So
there's no excuse.
No. So Lewis Cook was indifferent again. It's a shame because I really like him, but he was. And Solanke was indifferent. So I think it's a myth. I think Sean said earlier, we've certainly come back from international breaks and played well before. And we didn't have many.
The second half showed a bit of improvement, though, when Danjuma came on after about 60 minutes, didn't it, Sean? And you kind of look at it in hindsight and think, why wasn't he brought on earlier? But I suppose it's very easy to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I presumed we were worried about fitness of some degree because, I mean, it was screaming out for a Danjuma. And, you know, just him being on the field, he just didn't really, just felt like he didn't, if he was there for 90 minutes, I think he would have scored. I think he's that much class above. There was one moment in the second half I do want to draw attention to though, that I thought was really, really great part of Bournemouth doing what we can do really well, which was a counter-attack. There was one moment where there was intricacy of passing and we broke, and it ended up with Surridge out wide, and I think Lerma was running at the back and he couldn't quite get the cross to him. But I think there was 8-9 passes, very intricate, and then we just exploded. And that gave me a lot of positives.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think there were moments. There were a couple of moments in the game where you thought that is what we can be like. I just feel that the international duty thing is a bit of a red herring because some of the poorer players, or the players who had poorer games. I mean, I haven't seen Adam Smith have such a bad game for so long, but every time he touched the ball, he seemed to be giving it away or giving it to the opposition or just doing the wrong thing. And in fact, you could look at a number of players who just were off the pace, and I think it's that kind of collective collapse from all 11. You know, it's not just one or two that you feel could be excused because they were on international duty. It was like it affected everybody, and that's what's so bizarre.
Dan Gosling was well off it.
Yeah, well off it.
Sure. I just wonder how much, given the COVID situation, without the fans in the stadium, with all the protocols in place, it feels like there's a slight intensity issue across all English football that I'm watching at the moment. It's just not quite there. And I just wonder with the training ground, with all the restrictions in place, then you've got some of your best players have gone away, so there's less people around. I just wonder whether there's just a slight flatness, eeriness, you know, and turning up on game day, it's not the same. And I just wonder if that's a bit of a flow on.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Now, interesting question.
Maybe we're just trying to find excuses, right? Maybe that's what we're trying to do here.
There's an interesting question I want to put to you, Neil, because Keith Thomas has just put that Danjuma has said in interviews that his preferred partner is Solanke. Work that one out. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess if he's going to play two up front, if Danjuma is going to play as a central striker, then I imagine he would like to play with Solanke because they would be more of a traditional target focus and then mobile person running off them combination. Him and Josh King would probably make the same runs. He'd probably rate Solanke a little bit higher than Surridge. So to me, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Can I also say about Danjuma, and somebody's made the point on the chat as well, offside. I mean, how many times were we in promising positions and he just doesn't look along the line? And that happened against Manchester United last season, you know, when we were 3-2 down and we had a great chance to go 3-3. And it's Danjuma. He just gets so overexcited that he can see the run through and the goal that he just forgets, you know, that actually you've got to be onside before you make those runs. And I think that is the biggest frustration with him. I mean, I don't want to come across as overly critical, but I feel we're justified, bearing in mind that performance compared to what we saw the previous game, that we need to give the players a bit of stick because they've got to be better than that.
Yeah, it was hugely frustrating to watch. And Stanislas came on and I thought, you know, the brief minutes that he had, he looked pretty good, to be fair, but he didn't have enough time to open them up. And you know, the more the game went on, it looked as though QPR could actually win it. But thankfully, it was 0-0. And we didn't finish off any worse in the league table in terms of, there are teams below us that have caught up. But we're still in third position. We're still the same amount of points away from the top. But it's just quite disappointing to see those kind of performances. But if you look at the difference between our points garnered this campaign to the Championship, I think after 5 games in the Championship when we won it, we had 7 points. At this stage, we've got 11. All is not lost, is it, Jeff?
It's not lost. We are capable of. Well, come on, with King, with Brooks still at the club, we have got the best squad in that division by a country mile, and I'm not just seeing things through red and black lenses there. It's pretty clear. You look at opposition like QPR. I mean, they're struggling to get loan players in. You know, they had that guy from Middlesbrough who's been kicking around for years playing for them, and you know they can't boast players who are worth 40 million plus in their squad, and hardly anybody can now. So we need to get a grip of this division, prove that we're the best every game, and performances like Saturday just make you feel mentally. I'm not sure the players collectively have that attitude yet.
Hi, this is the big un, Steve Fletcher, and you're listening to Back of the Net.
So 0-0 it finished, and our next match is against Cardiff City on Wednesday. And later in the show, we're going to be previewing our match against the Bluebirds. But for now, let's go over our season so far and the start of JT's reign at Bournemouth. Now, due to streaming times, I've actually only got to watch a couple of full games. So I'm really keen to hear from you boys what your thoughts are and what differences and evolutions you've seen from an Eddie era into an early JT era.
Neil Dawson, do you want to start, actually?
He's done his jacket up. He's ready.
I put a jacket on. I'm a bit cold. Getting a bit cold. So, autumn nights are drawing in, aren't they? Bonfire nights here soon. So I thought I'd get a jacket on. What differences have we seen? Well, I think 3 at the back is probably the main huge difference. So Eddie flirted with it from time to time. Makes you wonder if maybe it was a Jason initiative. So I think 3 at the back is probably the major change that we've seen. I'm sort of in the same camp as Jeff. I think there's a danger here that we can talk about the Championship like the last time we were in it, when we felt a little bit fortunate to be in it and we had a lot of journeyman pros. I think now, the squad that we got is absolutely outstanding. And when you see it on paper against most teams, I think Coventry was probably the biggest example that we saw of that. And then when you saw it on grass as well, the difference is so extreme that while the points total's good, you can't argue with the points total. I never really get too wrapped up in points. I'm more interested in performances. When you support a team like Bournemouth for years, you're not in it to win stuff. What you like to see is, does the team perform better than their collective ability? Yes or no? And for years with Eddie, we far outperformed what the ability of the players. And then better players came in and it kind of caught up with us a bit. And then the last sort of year and a half has been the first time we've underperformed the ability of our players. And so far, I'm not convinced that we've performed to our ability other than in the Coventry match this season.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. I think the fluidity of the football, the flexibility of the system seems better. We just seem less rigid than we were under Eddie. And I also think it's interesting. I mean, John Amos makes a good point on the chat that some of the players who were perhaps out in the cold, Begovic, number 1, I did not see him coming back and being the regular starting goalkeeper. So there's obviously a different kind of attitude to some of the players who were out in the cold. Maybe that will make it easier to get Josh King back in the 11 and playing for the team, and maybe there will be fewer fallouts with players. I hope so, because I think we all need to be together. And one challenge we have that is going to be different is the relentlessness of the season. We've talked about this before, but we are coming into a real run of big fixtures, midweek Saturday, midweek Saturday, midweek Saturday. Players have got to be fitter than they perhaps were last season. And just just play for each other and be more together as a squad, perhaps, than they were last season. That's what I want to see.
Personally, from my point of view, I was relatively okay with the appointment of JT. I think some parts of our game have evolved slightly, but performances like that make me feel as though, maybe we haven't moved on as much as we should, because at the end of the day, we should have been beating QPR quite convincingly. It wasn't like a Premier League match where, a win would be a bonus. We really should have done a number on them in terms of the quality of the squad, the disparity with the values of the squad as well. I think it's effectively too early to judge at this stage. I think that there are a few very good signs, but there are the old Bournemouth ways that we certainly seem to have that always come back and haunt us. I think, we are evolving slightly, but it is too early. And like Jeff says, I think it would be good to have this conversation in 7 games time, or 6 games time as it is now, because we've got a run now of a number of matches within the next 20 or so games and days. And that's where I think it's going to be really, really tricky for us with our squad depth as well. I mean, yes, we've got people like Raquelme and Josh King who sort of might be back, but we've seen it before where we get 1 or 2 players having knocks, and then we're thinking, okay, we're looking at like Jadon Anthony on the bench or something like that, and that's the situation what we could be in. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation to have in about 3 weeks' time, and I think then perhaps we'll know more about it.
Neil, what's your thoughts in terms of us defensively? One of the criticisms of Eddie's teams over the years was, there was long periods where it just we could just concede for fun, but hey, we were going to score. I mean, so far we've only conceded 4 league goals. How much of that do you think is us being a little bit more solid, or are we putting a large part of that down to championship quality? You make a mistake, you don't always get punished.
I think it's a combination of all of those things. Certainly, there's been many, many times where whoever I've been watching the game with, we've said if that was Harry Kane, we were 1-0 down. So I think you've got that to take into account. I think the other thing is that we're still playing fairly defensively. I guess I didn't make that point first time when you asked me the question. The one difference I was really hoping to see was Eddie clearly sacrificed attacking in our last year and a half and moved to counter-attacking style of football, not the Bournemouth sort of dominating a possession and overlapping fullbacks and overloads that we played before. And the one thing I was really hoping for now that we're back in the Championship was to have a bit more fun and to really play high up the pitch, do overloads, etc. That's why I'm a bit disappointed with 3 at the back because you don't get the 2 players on the wing. And so I think because we are forming a very solid base and then looking to counter-attack from it, we're back in that position where we're conceding less goals, but we're not looking like scoring at times. So I think Norwich, if it hadn't been for Dan Juma's wonder goal, that would have been 0-0. Yesterday was 0-0. I mean, I just think, come on, we're in the Championship. Let's have a bit of fun.
Interesting. So, Jeff, I'm going to direct this at you. Comment from Keith Thomas, who he wants to pour a little bit of cold water. But are we starting to sound like entitled Premier League fans? He's very uncomfortable with saying we should be smashing the league.
Well, I just feel, like I say, we're Bournemouth fans, but actually we all see a lot of football. We all watch a lot of football, and the Championship this season does look a little bit weak. Leeds have gone up, and they had a really competitive squad. I haven't seen in all the Championship football I've seen this season anything that is terrifying for us. What I think the big issue is, it's I don't want to sound arrogant. It's about the attitude that we have as a group when we go onto that pitch, and that mindset when it's like it was at Middlesbrough, which is, we're superstars and we can win this game. All we do is just turn up and the goal will come and all the goals will come and we'll win. That is very dangerous in this division. What we need to have is the attitude we had against Norwich, the attitude we had against Coventry, where it was almost like, we're going to dominate this team. We're going to prove how much better we are than them and win the game because this is a challenge. And I think that needs to be the attitude for well, every game, obviously. If it's difficult to do, we've just got to have that for more games. And games like Middlesbrough, games like QPR, I'd hate for us to look back on the end of the season and think, you know what, we were 4 points short of automatic promotion because we put in performances like we do occasionally against sides like that. And I think that's the risk. I don't think it's arrogance. I think, you look at that squad, you think we've got players coming back from international breaks, like Colombia, and it's like we've got quality players in our team that no one else really has.
We've got no entitlement. We've got no entitlement as Bournemouth fans. We never have had. All you can do is judge what's going out on the pitch. So there's no arrogance as in we've got a divine right to be in the Premier League. I always still think any season where we're above mid-table in League One, we're doing well. For my bloody history of watching the club. So it's not an entitlement. But when you have got, potentially we've got a Danish central midfielder, a Colombian central midfielder, a Dutch winger because Danjuma's got caps, and boy wonder David Brooks on the right wing. You cannot say that is not a side that should be taking teams apart at this level in the way Newcastle did when they came down and kept a great side in years gone by. But that's not entitlement. I think that's just judging what you've got on the pitch.
Hi, this is the big un, Steve Fletcher, and you're listening to Back of the Net.
Right, so before we go on to our Cardiff City preview, I think we should briefly talk about the podcast because it's episode 100. We'll talk about where we've come from, where we plan to go, because the very first episode of the pod, it happened on February the 18th, 2016. And Sean Barker, it was an idea that you had, wasn't it? Because whilst the excellent All Departments podcast was putting out some excellent in-depth content discussing each and every Cherries match, we wanted to offer something a bit different, didn't we?
Yeah, and it was we could see the fan base of Bournemouth was growing, and we were starting to see, particularly on Twitter, you're starting to see fans like Patrick Devitt and Chase in the States who they really just started to fall in love with this club and they wanted to learn more. And I remember we had a chat, Sam, where we were really conscious of, there were so many stories to tell about this great club of ours. And like Neil said, we've been through some really, really dark periods, and the times of, I think we finished 17th. It felt like 10 years in a row in Division 3, and it was just, if we didn't go down, it was kind of okay. And so, this seed of thought kind of began. And then I thought, well, I'm going to need somebody on the ground because obviously being in New Zealand, it's pretty hard to try and do everything from there. And my old striking partner, Sam, came up, and it was about how do we tell these stories. And that really was where it all began.
It was, and we made it a magazine-led programme with features such as Do You Remember, which has still stood the test of time, the individual supporters' profiles, the Cherries news section, which you put together, the online review where I wrote a monologue of fans' written opinions on Twitter and the forums. And do you even remember, Sean, we dedicated an entire episode on a search for Frank Rolling?
We did, and we found Frank Rolling. That was we were so in one of the low points in France, I think, wasn't he?
Oh, right. He was running some kind of sports academy of some kind. But yeah, we eventually found him because we just had this conversation one day where we were talking about the old times, talking about the players that we really felt didn't quite make it for Bournemouth, and it was that lack of a Wembley appearance that I swear for him, he must be having nightmares even to this day, because he deserved to be playing in that match. He didn't. He scored in nearly every round leading up into it. He scored the goal that got us there, albeit we lost 3-2 on the night to Walsall. It was enough to take us through, and yeah, that was an interesting show. And Sean, we even did T-shirts. What were we thinking?
We did, I know, and we saw a T-shirt. We saw a back of the net T-shirt once made it onto the Sky Sports as well, which was quite impressive. I mean, I guess from my perspective, just looking back at some of those early shows, I think we kicked off with my favourite player of all time, which was Steve Jones, an interview with Jonesy, which kind of was really great to talk through the original Great Escape. Because again, when we first got into the Premier League, there was lots of footage over Eddie's reign, quite deservedly, because there was a huge period you just wouldn't even want to cover. But the stories that Jonesy told was fantastic. And then I think when we did the big interview with the big un, Steve Fletcher, who I think I talked to him for, it must have been near on an hour and a half. And we went from his beginnings at Hartlepool, which is, I remember when he first turned up, and all the way through. But for me, the moment we got, and I don't think he'd ever really talked about it, was where he explained how he sat in the office with Eddie, and Fletch said to him, I want to play in the Championship. I want a 1-year contract. And Eddie told him no. And Fletch they were both crying. And it was his honesty in that period for me was quite powerful, because he hadn't really talked about that much. So it was those things, I think, early on that definitely, was some great, kickstarts, really.
Yeah, agree. And going back to what we were talking about, Frank Rolling, Tom Jordan says that he didn't play due to a certain Eddie Howe coming back in. Not sure if I recognise the name. Maybe it was justified in the long term. Not sure. I think he did okay. But yeah, it's been an interesting ride, and doing a podcast, I've got to say, it's quite a commitment. And we've always prided ourselves on doing all sorts of different content, like the under-18s, the ladies' side. We featured content on our overseas supporters, and all these podcasts are available to listen to back on your podcast app or AFCBpodcast.com. And Sean's feature on overseas supporters was absolutely fantastic, because it showed you the passion that people all over the world had for the Cherries. Now, whilst the audio podcast has been stripped down a bit, the YouTube channel now takes responsibility for most of that stuff. But Sean, we did try to do some video early on, didn't we? Putting a few videos out, but it didn't really work out, did it? I mean, during one of the first videos you recorded, you were rudely interrupted by a dog, weren't you?
Can you tell me you're about to play this footage? Do you still have the footage?
No, I haven't got it. I'll
hunt it down. We were doing a promo. This is before the professionalism of Jeff got involved, and it took me about 15 edits to try and do an outdoor link, and a dog decided to do its little bit of business. But
Jimmy Quinn's dog, I bet.
I guess from my perspective, I mean, I just want to use the platform just to say, one, Sam Davis, phenomenal work to begin it, to see it through, and then Jeff to come on board when there was a bit of a lull, and me and Sam we were just burnt out, really, to be honest. There was nothing else around, and it was a lot of work, and Jeff coming on board, revitalizing it, and then getting people like Neil and like Tom and others to see it, how it has now become to a stage where Sky Sports are regularly, using us as a source. What?
It's bizarre. It is bizarre. And like you say, family life got in the way, and we wound it down. And I got an email from Jeff Hayward who thought it was worthy of picking it up again. I mean, Jeff, what was the thinking behind that at the time? Were you missing it?
Well, I did miss it, because you went an entire season, and it's still, it's going to be, when we come to write the history of the podcast, Sean, it's going to be the missing year. What happened in that year? Because you were
hangover.
You were my ritual on a Monday morning, listening to you, and then suddenly you weren't there anymore, and it was like, what's going on? And
we got a little bit of money, Jeff, and I think we went and maxed out the back of the net credit card, which I think you're still paying off. I think.
Yeah. But yeah. So I just thought, and also I think we are, or we were, the most underreported club in the Premier League, and where do you go for quality stuff about Bournemouth? And it was you two guys were the key bit of information for me. So I thought, I've got to just do everything I can to persuade Sam to come out of retirement. Park the yacht in Poole Harbour, Sam. Come on, you can do it, mate.
So we had a meeting at Mark Bennett's in Ashley Cross. We had a coffee and we discussed it. And I said, well, to be honest, Jeff, it just took so much time in putting it together. But then 2 weeks later, I'm doing YouTube stuff as well. I don't know what happened. And I think, the whole YouTube philosophy was making the show more accessible to people, because I think podcast, it's like an investment. It's a commitment for people to listen to, whereas YouTube, you can dip in and out. And from the Well, I tell you what, we had a few tag-along subscribers when we first did the YouTube stuff that I name-checked on Twitter today, including Gail Hope. Thank you, Gail. She's in chat. Nobby Dog, Rob Trowick as well, Matthew Barker, to name but a few. It's gone all right, hasn't it, Jeff? So since the reincarnation, what have been your highlights so far? I mean, I think I know.
Yeah, well, can I mention Topless Willow again? Because I mean, I still close my eyes and I've got that image burnt into my memory somehow. I can't shake it off sometimes. Harry Redknapp and his dog licking its bits behind him when we were interviewing him.
Oh yeah.
I tell you what, actually. Some of the ex-players that we've talked to, I mean, getting hold of Matt Ritchie's phone number and then ringing him up and he actually answered and said, yeah, come on. I mean, that sort of, it's special. It's special. And I never thought that those sorts of moments would be ours and that we'd end up talking to so many great legends of the club. Tommy Heffernan saying he'd break Ryan Fraser's leg is something I'll never forget either.
And, you know, I'm the self-proclaimed techie person, I suppose, and Jeff's the organizer, and he's been the one to help us get some big names. And Neil, you chatted to a few legends during our interview series. Anyone stand out for you?
I think Tommy Heffernan was. I mean, Harry Redknapp was the most famous one that we did, wasn't he? So certainly, you know, when my friends and stuff like that, they were just so excited that Harry Redknapp was coming on the show. But if you were to leave out what people have achieved in the game, the Tommy Heffernan interview was just comedy gold, and it was also a really great insight into, you know, footballers were very, very ordinary people in the sort of 80s, and so I really enjoyed that one. I really enjoyed Ian Bishop. I thought he was similarly comedy gold, as well as a club legend, and it was also great. Milton Graham, that was really interesting, hearing about racism in the 80s and how that affected him. So I mean, it was an honor to be a part of those interviews. It really was, and to talk to people. But yeah, Tommy Heffernan is that's a podcast that could go against any podcast ever, I think.
I watched that clip again today. I had to watch that little 10-second clip about Ryan Fraser. Oh, that's etched in the memory. Go on, Jeff.
That's great. Oh, well, I was going to say, I think also, you know, we forget that what the club is about. You know, this is a club built on the community, and one of the best things for me has been the way that we've had this flipping pandemic. Nobody's been able to go to a game, let alone, you know, talk to people about the game. But this podcast, the YouTube channel, everything we're doing, it's been great to engage with fans, talk to them on social media, get people involved who maybe hadn't even thought of appearing on a podcast before. And I think that, to me, is what this club is all about. You know, it's not about us. It's about everybody getting involved and contributing. And I think it's been fantastic.
Yeah, it really is. So here we are at episode 100. Well, it's called episode 100. We've actually done more because myself and Sean, we created the first episode called Not the First Episode. I think we did a 5.5 as well. And then we also did some Euro podcasts as well. But it's episode 100. What of the future? Well, firstly, doing what we do, it's taking more time than ever before. And sometimes we do look at ourselves and think, why the hell do we do it? If you're able to support us with a coffee, it would be much appreciated. I'll pop the link at the bottom in a minute. Thank you to everyone that's done so before, because it helps us to pay the fees for our YouTube streaming platform that this is being broadcast on now, the subscription for our graphics software, the hosting provider for the podcast, equipment such as mics, decent cameras, lighting, a whole lot more besides, and also travel costs for when I'm going over to Canford Magna to film absolutely nothing new. But anyway, so yeah, no new developments.
Like Gardener's World, those ones, Sam. I love it. I love nothing more than fields of grass and mud just waving around. But
I need to learn the Latin names of plants just to sound that little bit more intelligent. But it was nice to hear Jordan Clark name check us on Radio Silent and on AFCB TV on Saturday as well. Now, I even have invested in a 4G dongle actually, so we could get our match interviews out quicker after we film them outside the ground, but that's not been put to use yet. But we'd obviously like to go the sponsorship route to avoid us having to ask. And if you're a company and you're watching this and you're interested, well, do send us an email to hello@afcbpodcast.com, or just get in touch with myself or Jeff, because in time, that might happen. And Jeff, we're in a good place to expand as a podcast and YouTube channel, aren't we?
Yeah, we get regular calls from the media to comment, when we've got seismic things happening as we had this season. And I don't think we would have imagined getting name checked on Sky Sports or getting called up by the BBC or 5 Live, And in fact, I'll tell you, one of the other highlights I had was actually doing that fan off with on Robbie Savage's show a few months ago. Because there's nothing better than taking the mickey out of that long-haired former Manchester United player.
That's a good way to say dickhead, Jeff. Well done. Anyway, right, it's Cardiff City, and that's on Wednesday.
Hi, this is the big un, Steve Fletcher, and you're listening to Back of the Net.
Now, this season in the league, Cardiff have not had the same outcome in consecutive games. They're a team that sits 12th in the division with 7 points from 5 games. In our last match at the Cardiff City Stadium, we lost 2-0 there. It was a very emotionally charged atmosphere after the death of Emiliano Sala. Now, under Neil Harris at the moment, they've got impressive away form recently on Saturday with a 1-0 win over Preston. But at home, they're not quite firing. Now, Jeff, one of the first podcasts that we recorded together was entitled "My God, That Guy is Talented," regarding Harry Wilson, who they have recently signed. Alas, perhaps his dead ball promise was slightly more of note than anything else on the football pitch, but I'm sure that he'll be a player that's looking to get one over us, eh?
Yeah, well, hopefully Neil Harris plays him on the right wing, which will neutralise his effectiveness. I mean, it's written in the flipping script that he's going to score a belter from just outside the box in the last minute to win that game for the 1-0, isn't it? But hopefully not. I mean, I think overall as a team, I think we should be thinking this is going to be a tough game. We should be thinking we've got a point to prove after the way we performed on Saturday. I'm sure the coaching team will give the lads a bit of a rocket. So we should be motivated, and we might have a couple of players back. Stanislas might be in the starting lineup. There might be, Josh King might be on the bench. Brooks might be on the bench. We might have a bit of a stronger team. I expect Danjuma and Solanke probably to start, or maybe Danjuma and King to start.
One of the things that Kurt Tovey, who's a regular on the podcast, very analytical, he's been christened Gary Neville for some of his opinions, and he says, sometimes it feels like Jason Tindall doesn't play the formation that warrants the opposition that we play, and he says that he felt the 3-5-2 at the weekend against QPR was perhaps the wrong formation to play. And he didn't just say that in hindsight. If you check the preview video, he said that before kickoff. So he stuck to his guns on that. And he said, ironically, in the post-match free-for-all, that actually against Cardiff, the 3-5-2 probably would work better. What are your thoughts on how we should be playing it against Cardiff, Neil?
I think we should go. I just think the players that we've got lend themselves more naturally to a 4-3-3. The problem that we've got is we've collected a number of decent defenders, so it's who do you leave out? And I think, unfortunately, you've got to leave one of Smith or Stacey out because you've got to play Rico on the left, delivering left-wing crosses. So, and this is a problem. Last year, we could never bite the bullet, so we ended up playing Smith there instead of Rico, and then we looked better when Rico played towards the last few games. So we've got that issue that we haven't resolved. So I'd like us to once and for all resolve that issue, have a back four. I think Lerma, Cook, and/or one of Gosling or Billing play much better in a 3, and that would give them the 3. And then I think we've got quality out wide, be it Danjuma, Stanislas, Brooks, whoever plays, and I think so. Therefore, we need to get wide with them, and then just push Lerma up into the box for the crosses coming in, or Gosling as well, whoever's there. And I just think that to me, it's screamingly obvious that that's the formation that we should play. So that's what I would like us to do against Cardiff. The other thing I'm really looking forward to in the Cardiff game is when we concede a free kick on the edge of the box, the fight between Lee Tomlin and Harry Wilson as to who's going to take that free kick.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Because everyone's going on and on and on about Harry Wilson's free kick ability, but Lee Tomlin scored a number of superb free kicks for Cardiff last year. And you can bet your life that if it suits a right-footed player, Harry Wilson's not getting anywhere near it.
Lee Tomlin will certainly be hungrier, I'm sure. Anyway, Martin Young is a Cardiff City fan, and I chatted to him actually about an hour ago, and he said to me, I think in all honesty, in terms of this season, we started poorly, and we've taken a bit of last season's form into this season. Since then, Neil Harris has started to shape the squad, and he seems to be backed, more importantly, by the club as well. Some promising signings have come in and some strange outgoings, he says. Callum Patterson was a fan's favourite, so that didn't go down too well when he left. Mendes Lang left the club immediately with his contract terminated. Etheridge was also sold cheap. In hindsight, he says, it was obvious that Harris inherited an ageing, unbalanced, high-wage squad and was making rooms for the likes of Harry Wilson, Benkovic, etc. There does seem to be a small buzz back for the fans, but they can't seem to put their form into action at the Cardiff City Stadium. Should we go around and do some predictions? Shall we? Jeff?
I'm going to say hangover, not over, and we'll draw 1-1, and it'll be Tomlin or Wilson that scores against us in the game. There you go.
Oh, Sean, Salvatore, what are you thinking?
4-2, Neil Young, 30-yard screamer. Oh, no, sorry. Wrong. That used to be every week. That was always the pick. Yeah. I think we will come out firing, and I think it will be 3-1. I think that Wilson or Tomlin will score. And no, I just think if we can, I agree with Neil. I think if Danjuma comes in, I'd actually be okay with us playing the same formation and same lineup, but just having that extra bit of creativity up there with Solaki. So yeah, I'm 3-1.
Neil?
I think we're going to win 1-0. I think if we don't change the way we play, we're going to become a side that's more effective away from home than at home. And I think we're defensively solid, and it will suit us not to have to attack and then to counter-attack. So 1-0.
Okay, and I'm going to finish off with a 2-1. I think Bournemouth are going to get a 2-1. And like I said on an earlier video, and for anyone on the podcast, it's going to be very difficult to provide previews over the next spell of games because we're going to be constantly rotating, matches coming thick and fast, and I'm sure there's going to be injuries aside. So make sure you keep an eye on the YouTube channel because we'll try to do what we can in terms of the matches that are coming up. Now, remember, at the start of the show, we did this. So I'm going to put the questions to the panel. 3 questions. They're all about records as we've reached our record episode 100. Which player scored the highest number of goals in a season for the Cherries? This is one that Neil Dawson will know, surely.
It's got to be Ted McDougall, wasn't it? And was it 42 in...
42.
All right,
league,
Google.
Oh,
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, very good.
42 in League and Cup. And was it 31, Lee?
You know what? I don't know the breakdown, but you're probably right. And I tell you what, congratulations for that. Yeah, Neil, you've got that absolutely spot on. And a number of people who are watching this live as well also got the correct answer as well. Jeff, do you know what the record attendance was at Dean Court to the nearest 1,000? And who is it against?
So the biggest attendance I ever was in was we were playing Bolton Wanderers, who were league leaders at the time in Division 3 South, I think must have been, and there was 18,000 there. But I think it would probably be one of the cup ties, which would be the Manchester United game. Was that in the 50s? I think it was 20 odd thousand. I can't remember the exact number, but it was huge.
Go on, try to predict to the nearest thousand.
Gosh, everyone squeezed in like sardines. 25,000.
27, wasn't it?
It was 28,799, and correctly, it was against Manchester United. FA Cup 6th round, 2nd of March, 1957. We lost 2-1 on that. So fair play.
Dinner then.
They must have been.
I've been in that ground, so I'm not. I don't go back as far as Jeff. I think Middlesbrough was my record one, the title, going for the title in '86, and I think there was something like 14 or 15 officially, but they reckon unofficially was 18 or 19 because they just opened the gates, and that was almost like you couldn't breathe territory. So how on earth they got double that in is just.
I recall it was the same with the Great Escape with the Shrewsbury game. I know that was another one that the turnstiles were just opened, and I don't know. I heard rumours of 18 being in there that night.
Wow. Yeah, I remember God that night was absolutely superb. Wow, amazing.
Do you know what I remember about that night? Sorry, we're going off on tangents now. Can I do tangents, Sam, or are we did?
You can do tangents. It's our 100th episode. Anything goes.
The thing I remember about that night is those were in the days. For younger fans listening, they'll probably find this hard to believe, but there were no tickets, were there? So you had to get there early to get a good spot and to get in and to guarantee that you got yourself into the ground. So the ground was full at 6:30, and for all the big games back in the sort of 70s and 80s, the ground was full because you had to get. That was the only way you could guarantee you got in, was to be one of the first people to get there.
Yeah.
And I remember the first players running out to do that sort of, not the proper warm up, but the sort of preamble. The first couple of players that walked out the tunnel got a standing ovation from about 11,000, 12,000 people, and you could just see the absolute horror on the face. But the ground, the same. George Best debut was the same, where the ground was full an hour and a half before kickoff.
Neil, you know what? I don't think that's going off on a tangent, and that's very professional of you. It's not like it's not like you maybe got up and had to look out the window to see a girl walking past, or maybe even had dinner halfway through. Because as a professional, you wouldn't do that, right? Honestly, the stories we've had. One of the players that did play at the Old Dean Court could be the answer for this one, which I'm going to give to Sean. Which player has garnered the most league appearances for AFC Bournemouth?
You've thrown me hopefully a very simple one here with the big one.
Yeah. Do you know how many?
It was 7. What was he? 720 odd. But did that include cup games? So was his league appearances?
I've got no
well,
idea.
we used to get knocked out in the first round all the time, so that's only like 12 extra games, right? So
it was Sean O'Driscoll, wasn't it? I remember him passing Sean O'Driscoll's record, which was
that's
in
right.
the
Yes.
Yeah.
How many
He
is
was in the
how many is he
690s,
ahead
wasn't
of
he?
690s? Is he? Whoa.
That was my guess. O'Driscoll was in the 690s. Would that be right, Sammy?
I need John Sharkey here. CFAX would answer that. I haven't got the stats to hand, but we'll have to Google it, and we will maybe reveal all as a teaser, a carrot dangler for episode 101. So there we go. We are nearly at the end of the show, and congratulations if you got those at home. Thank you very much. So Cardiff City on Wednesday, you can watch on Sky Sports Red Button, but because it's a Red Button match, it's not counted as a televised match. So you can also watch it on AFCB TV. Of course, on Sky, you won't get the dulcet tones of Chris Temple and John Williams. But on Sky, you will get a commentator of some kind. On Now TV, it's worth checking on the Tuesday, the match before, to see whether your Now TV app will have the extra bonus games, because some platforms do have them and others don't. It's a bit confusing. On the Tuesday, there are a load of championship games with some red buttons ones, so do check that out. But Cardiff and also Bristol City the week after are on the Sky Sports Red Button, so you don't have to pay AFCB TV for that. But I'm sure as someone that wants to have the best done for the club, maybe you should pay the £10. But anyway, that is an option that you can choose later on. So, guys, thank you so much for coming on, Mr. Sean Barker. Appreciate it, mate.
Thank you. Lovely to be on. Happy birthday, Back of the Net.
Jeff, as ever, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you. Did you get a telegram from the Queen for this then?
I think it's got to be there somewhere. I think there's a few PPI leaflets over there, but I'll have a look under that. Yeah, you never know. And Neil Dawson, thank you as ever for coming on the show, mate.
No, thank you. Please tell me you're going to call the next episode Room 101.
You need to be a script writer.
That's good.
Neil, thank you very much, mate. Appreciate it.
Cheers,
Hi, this is Gary Chapman, the bloke who stands in the back of the North Stand shouting, "Up the Cherries!" You're listening to Back of the Net.
So thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. Remember, if you want to get involved, you can buy us a coffee by financially contributing to what we do. But also, if you can't do that, what would be handy is if you could leave us a review on your podcast app as well. Your support is much appreciated. If you want to do so, just go to AFCB podcast /coffee. Now, our next podcast is going to be out next Monday, where we'll be covering the Cardiff game, but also Watford next week as well. But make sure you stay tuned onto YouTube, where you can view the latest content, including the post-match free-for-alls, the home of some very interesting and raw final whistle opinion. Thank you for all the live comments that have come in during the show. Really appreciate it. And, you know, at this point, I just want to say, over the last year, but also previously before that as well, thank you to everyone that's liked our videos, subscribed, who've given ideas, who've emailed us, criticised us, blocked us on Twitter, sent me a message of support over WhatsApp or whatever, shared posts, retweeted, talked about us, and more. As Jeff said, over the last year, we've somehow managed to be featured in, and I'm going to hold my breath here, Wave 105, Radio Solent, BBC 5 Live, Love Sport, Talk Sport 2, Sky Sports, ITV, South Today, Premier League Productions, New York Times, 442 Magazine, and even randomly, the Portsmouth News, the Newcastle Evening Chronicle, and the Express and Star in Wolverhampton. Weird. I don't know where this is going with Back of the Net, but whilst I am fronting it, this is yours. So if you want to get involved, even to present and take some of the burden off me, give me a shout and we'll certainly get talking. Until then, though, many thanks for your positive comments. And this has been Back of the Net, the AFC Bournemouth podcast.
Back of the Net!